I was the only one without a gift under the tree. But I didn't cry. I reached into my purse and everything changed. My name is Della Theodore. I'm 72 years old. And I live alone in a small brick house just outside Asheville, North Carolina. It's quiet here. The kind of quiet some people find lonely, but I've come to appreciate it. There's a rhythm to my days that feels like a slow, steady heartbeat. I get up with the sun, make my coffee just the way I like it, a little cream, no sugar, and sit by the big bay window where the morning light hits the hardwood floors just right. I do my puzzles in the afternoon, watch the local news at 6, and call it a night by 9. There's comfort in this rhythm, a gentle predictability I've leaned on, especially since my husband, Ed, passed away 7 years ago. We were married for 41 years. He had strong hands from a life of fixing things and a soft laugh that could fill a room. A mechanic by trade, but he knew how to fix more than engines. He had a way of listening that made you feel seen, a way of knowing just what to say to mend a bruised spirit. Losing him knocked the breath clean out of me. For a long time, I felt like a ship without an anchor, adrift in a silent sea. But little by little, day by day, I built something steady for myself. I wasn't thriving, not yet. But I was standing. I hadn't heard from my son, Alvin, in over a year. Not a real conversation, anyway. A few happy birthday texts. One photo of my grandchildren, Lacey and Leo, on Halloween, their faces bright with sugar and excitement. That was the extent of it. He and his wife, Ivy, had slowly, almost imperceptibly, pulled away over the years. It started after Ed's funeral. Ivy grew quiet around me, her smiles becoming tighter, more forced. Alvin got busier with work, his calls becoming shorter, less frequent. Visits stopped altogether. One day, I looked up from my life and realized I wasn't truly a part of theirs anymore. So, when the phone rang on a chilly Tuesday morning in early December, and I saw Ivy's name light up on the screen, my first thought was, wrong number. I let it ring once, twice, a third time. My finger hovered over the ignore button, but a flicker of something, hope, maybe, or just curiosity, told me to answer. Hello. Hi, Della, Ivy said, her voice a little too cheerful, a little too bright. It's Ivy. I blinked, watching a cardinal land on the bare branches of the dogwood tree in my front yard. I know. She laughed lightly, as if I'd said something witty. I know this is a little sudden, but Alvin and I were talking, and we wanted to invite you to Charleston for Christmas this year. With the kids. Everyone will be here. I looked out the window. The leaves had all fallen, leaving the trees stark and vulnerable against the pale winter sky. I hadn't been invited to anything in 4 years, not even to Lacey's high school graduation. Well, I said slowly, the word tasting foreign. That's unexpected. I know, Ivy said quickly, filling the silence. But the kids have been asking about you. And Alvin thought, well, it's time. Time for what? I didn't say it. I just sat there with the phone warm against my ear and my heart doing a complicated flutter I couldn't quite name. I mean, it's been too long, she added. We'd love to have you. There was a pause. I heard a dog bark in the background, a high, happy sound. Probably their labradoodle, Tofu, the one I'd only seen in pictures. I'll think about it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Okay, sure, she replied, the cheerfulness already sounding strained. We'd love to see you. We hung up. I stared at the phone for a long while. Ivy had always been polite on the surface. Impeccably, flawlessly polite. But behind the pleasantries, there was a wall of cold glass I could never quite cross. Alvin didn't fight it. He just faded with her, retreating to her side of the wall until I could barely see him anymore. The last time I saw them all was Christmas Eve, 4 years ago. I'd baked 3 of my best pies, apple crumble, pecan, and a chocolate silk, and brought thoughtful gifts for everyone. I remember Ivy whispering something to Alvin while I was mid-sentence, a dismissive little gesture as if I wasn't even in the room. That night, they handed out presents one by one, and my name was never called. Not one person noticed. Not my son. Not my grandchildren. I left the next morning before the sun was up, without saying a word. That was the day I stopped calling. The hurt was a deep, physical ache, but I was tired. So tired of forcing myself into places where I clearly wasn't welcome. And now, suddenly, they wanted me back at their perfectly set table. I stood up from the chair by the window and walked to the kitchen, my joints protesting the cold. I made another cup of tea, stirring it slowly, watching the vortex swirl in the ceramic mug. I could feel that old, familiar ache rising up in my chest. The one that whispers, "Why wasn't I enough?" But this time, another voice answered. A steadier one I hadn't heard in a long, long time. "They don't know what you've been doing these last few years." I took a deep, calming breath, picked up the phone, and texted Ivy back. "I'll come." Then I set the cup down, walked to my bedroom, and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Tucked beneath a stack of old letters from Ed was a thick manila envelope, sealed and waiting. The title, printed in neat block letters, read, Q4 Performance Report, Second Wind Collective LLC. They didn't know who I'd become. But they were about to find out. After I stopped waiting on birthday cards and holiday invites, I had to figure out what to do with all the silence. It was deafening at first. I still missed Ed with a fierceness that could steal my breath, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I couldn't spend the rest of my days just watching life move past my window. I had Ed's life insurance money, a sum I hadn't touched. It sat in a savings account, a quiet testament to his foresight and care. I was living simply off Social Security and a small pension from his auto shop. My bills were manageable. I cooked for one. There were no fancy trips or expensive hobbies, just enough to get by. But after that hollow ache of my 70th birthday, I decided to invest a little of that money in myself. Not a cruise, not new clothes. I bought a laptop. A brand new one, not a hand-me-down. I remember standing in the electronics aisle at the big box store, feeling utterly out of my depth, but I picked a model that had good reviews and a backlit keyboard. I figured if I was going to learn something new, I needed tools that worked for me, not against me. That first night, I set it up on my kitchen table, signed up for a free email account, and then typed into the search bar, how to start a blog. I fell down a rabbit hole of YouTube videos and articles that sounded like another language at first. SEO, keywords, landing pages, funnels. But I kept watching, kept reading. I wrote everything down in a little blue notebook, the kind with a spiral binding, and made a tab that said, "Start here." The next day, I found an online course called Digital Basics for Beginners 60+. It wasn't flashy or slick, but the instructor was a woman about my age with a kind voice and a patient demeanor. The videos were clear, with step-by-step instructions and captions I could pause and replay. I finished the whole course in a week. I felt a surge of pride, like I'd just climbed a hill no one, myself included, thought I'd even try to ascend. With that small dose of confidence, I moved on to e-commerce. I learned how to open a shop on Etsy, how to design simple printables, things I knew people like me could use. Grocery lists, prayer journals, memory books for those who were grieving. I wasn't a graphic artist, but I had ideas. I discovered a tool called Canva, and it was a revelation. Drag and drop, easy on the eyes. I spent my evenings creating templates and testing different cover designs on the weekends. Slowly, meticulously, it all started to come together. That's when I thought of the name for my blog, Second Wind Stories. It hit me one afternoon while I was sweeping the kitchen floor. That's exactly what this felt like. A second wind. Not a dramatic restart, but a fresh breath after a long, hard stretch. I bought the domain name for $12 and used a simple website builder to put up my first post. It was called, What No One Tells You About Turning 70. It got 12 views. Then 20. A few days later, a woman named Nora from Ohio left a comment. "This is exactly how I feel. Thank you for putting it into words." I stared at that comment like it was a nugget of gold. Someone was listening. Someone understood. I joined a Facebook group for women over 60 who were starting online businesses. It was called Wise Women Build. There was no fake hype or get-rich-quick nonsense, just real women figuring things out together. We shared tips, cheered each other on, and asked questions without feeling foolish. That group became my favorite part of the day. One woman posted about Amazon KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. She wrote short guides and journals, published them herself, and was earning a steady income every month. I followed her instructions to the letter and put together a small ebook called After the Funeral, Finding Yourself Again. It was short, just 42 pages long. It was honest and real. I priced it at $3.99. I didn't expect much, but it sold. Not hundreds at first, but a few copies every week. Then someone shared it in a large online grief support group. Suddenly, I was getting emails from women in Kansas, Oregon, even British Columbia. In 3 months, it sold over 2,000 copies. Every week, I learned something new: how to write better product descriptions, how to use hashtags on social media, how to build an email list. It wasn't magic, it was work. But it was work I cared about, work that felt meaningful. I set up a small shop connected to my blog, selling printable journal pages, grief trackers, and daily reflection guides. I kept my prices fair. I knew the women buying from me weren't made of money. They were like me, just looking for something that felt real. By my 71st birthday, I launched a paid newsletter. $5 a month. I called it Tea Letters. Every Friday, I sent out a short piece, part story, part encouragement, part practical advice. I wrote about loneliness, finding purpose after loss, memory, and self-worth. All the things no one really talks about once you're past a certain age. My first month, 38 women signed up. Then 60. Then 120. One evening, I logged in to check my business dashboard and saw a notification. Monthly earnings, $1,140. I just sat there, staring at the screen. Not because it was a fortune, but because I did that. From scratch. Alone. Quietly. I didn't tell Alvin. I didn't tell Ivy. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew they wouldn't see it for what it was. They'd turn it into something small, a cute hobby, or worse, something to critique and find fault with. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted peace. And I had it. I saved every penny I earned. I reinvested some of it into better software and a new printer. I upgraded my phone so I could record voice notes when an idea struck me at the grocery store or on a walk. I even had my blog professionally redesigned by a woman in Michigan whose own granddaughter had helped her start a business. I had orders coming in daily. I had readers writing me letters. One woman mailed me a scarf she'd crocheted just to say thank you. Another sent me her mother's old cookbook to keep the traditions going. I wasn't just building an income, I was building a community. And still, not a word to my family. When Alvin posted pictures of their new designer patio set, I liked it and said nothing. When Ivy bragged about the kids' science fair wins, I smiled and scrolled past. I stayed silent, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I didn't need them to clap for me anymore. I had built something real. And one way or another, this Christmas, they were going to see it. The drive from the misty hills of Asheville to the coastal plains of Charleston took a little over 6 hours. I'd packed the car the night before, just one suitcase, my handbag, and a basket of wrapped gifts I'd chosen carefully. Not expensive, but thoughtful. A lavender-scented candle for Lacey, a leather-bound notebook for Alvin, a set of artisanal kitchen towels for Ivy that matched the colors I'd seen in her last Instagram post. It wasn't about the cost of the gifts. It was about showing that I still made an effort, even after everything. I wore black slacks, a soft gray cashmere sweater, and a warm wool coat. Simple, clean. My hair was pulled back neatly, and my only jewelry was a pair of small gold hoops Ed had given me for our 25th anniversary. I looked like myself. When I pulled up to their house, I sat in the car for a few minutes, just breathing. The place was even bigger than I remembered. White brick with those sharp, black shutters that were so popular these days. 2 shiny SUVs sat in the driveway, one of them so new it still had the dealer plates on it. I took a deep breath and rang the bell. Ivy answered, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Della," she said, drawing my name out. "You made it." She leaned in for a quick, airless hug that barely touched my shoulders. Her perfume was strong and citrusy. She stepped back and waved me inside as if I were a delivery person, not family. Inside, it smelled of pine and cinnamon. Everything was immaculate, magazine neat. The Christmas tree in the corner looked like it had been decorated by a professional, all silver and white, not a single handmade ornament in sight. Alvin came around the corner holding his phone, his thumbs still moving across the screen. "Hey, Mom," he said, giving me a distracted, one-armed hug. "Glad you made it." "Glad to be here," I smiled. The kids didn't get up. They were sprawled on the couch, their eyes locked on their tablets. I waved. "Hi, sweethearts." A murmur of "hey" came back, but their faces never turned toward me. Ivy led me upstairs to the guest room. It was small and colder than the rest of the house. The bedding was old, faded florals, the kind I remembered from their first apartment. A fine layer of dust coated the dresser. There was no lamp, just a harsh overhead light that flickered when I turned it on. "If you need anything, let me know," Ivy said, her hand already on the doorknob, eager to retreat. "Thank you," I replied to the empty doorway. I unpacked in silence, lining my shoes neatly under the bed. I placed the basket of gifts in a corner, took out my pajamas, and laid them on the pillow. I sat on the edge of the mattress for a moment, just staring at my suitcase as if it might say something comforting back to me. Later, we gathered in the formal dining room. Ivy had made something ambitious: roast duck with a cherry glaze, quinoa salad with pomegranate seeds. There were name cards on the table. Mine was at the far end, near the serving cart. The conversation moved fast, a flurry of topics I couldn't contribute to. Ivy talked about her company's fourth quarter numbers, something about conversion rates and ad spend. Alvin jumped in to talk about a new investment app. Lacey, my granddaughter, asked about cryptocurrency. I sipped my tea and listened. No one asked how I'd been. No one asked what I was working on or if I was still writing, not that I expected them to. This table had always made space for loud voices. I was never one of them. Midway through dinner, Ivy looked over at me, a polite afterthought. "Della, what are you up to these days? Still keeping busy with those retirement hobbies?" The way she said hobbies made it sound so small, so trivial. The others chuckled softly. Even Alvin grinned. I looked down at my plate, took another sip of tea, and gave a small, non-committal smile. "Something like that." She nodded, her attention already turning back to the others. I chewed my food slowly, listening to the rhythm of their lives, so separate from my own. They still thought I was just idle. Invisible. I let them think that. For now. If you've ever walked into a room and felt like you were taking up space, like you were just another item on someone else's to-do list, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you're not going to subscribe, at least be honest with yourself and tell me in the comments, why do we keep waiting for people who already closed the door? I woke up early on Christmas morning, as I always do. The house was still and quiet. I could hear the low hum of the furnace and the occasional creak of floorboards settling. I got dressed, made the bed with neat hospital corners, and went downstairs, hoping to help with breakfast. But Ivy waved me away from the kitchen. "Relax, Stella," she said, her voice strained with forced hospitality. "We've got it handled." So I sat in the corner armchair while the sweet, warm smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air. Ivy buzzed around in a matching silk pajama set, calling out instructions. Alvin was pouring orange juice, his eyes still glued to his phone. The kids were buzzing with excitement, bouncing from room to room, waiting for the green light to tear into the mountain of presents under the tree. By 8 o'clock, everyone had gathered in the living room. The fireplace was roaring, the stockings were overflowing, and the tree sparkled like something out of a department store window. There were dozens of gifts underneath it, all carefully wrapped in coordinated paper, each with a fancy tag and a perfect bow. "Okay," Ivy called out, clapping her hands together. "Let's get started." The kids dove in first. Boxes were torn open. Wrapping paper flew across the floor. There were squeals of delight, mumbled thank yous, and the sharp sound of plastic packaging being ripped apart. Lacey unwrapped a brand new MacBook and gave her dad a huge hug. Her younger brother, Leo, got a top-of-the-line gaming headset and a smartwatch. Ivy handed Alvin a sleek new golf bag, then opened a large, elegant box from him. It was a designer handbag, one she had clearly picked out for herself. They smiled for photos, posing in front of the tree. Ivy kissed Alvin's cheek and said, "You did good this year." I sat quietly on the edge of the couch, a placid smile fixed on my face, watching the spectacle. Then Ivy looked around the room, a faux look of concern on her face, as if she'd suddenly noticed something amiss. "Wait, did we forget one?" she said, scanning the dwindling pile. Alvin cleared his throat and looked down at his coffee mug. Lacey glanced at me, her brow furrowed, and opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but then she closed it again. "Oh no," Ivy said with a tight little laugh. "I must have forgotten you in all the planning, Della. So much going on. You know how it is." I nodded slowly. "Of course." My grandson, Leo, chuckled, still holding his new game controller. "Granny's used to it." The room filled with a ripple of light laughter. It wasn't overtly mean, not really, but it cut just the same. I looked around at the piles of expensive gifts, the scraps of ribbon, the joy on their faces, and then at the empty space on the floor in front of me. No box. No card. Not even a stocking with my name on it. I took a slow sip of my tea. It was warm and steadying in my hands. Then I reached into my handbag, my movements slow and calm. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. The room quieted a little. "I got myself something this year." Ivy tilted her head, her smile faltering. "I thought I'd share it with all of you," I added, pulling out a small, crisp envelope. Inside was a printed summary, 4 pages neatly stapled together. Nothing flashy. I laid it gently on the coffee table in front of me and looked up, meeting each of their eyes. "You know that little blog I started a while back?" I said, keeping my tone light and casual. "Well, it's turned into something." No one moved. "It's called Second Wind Stories," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "It has around 85,000 readers now, mostly women over 60. I write about life, aging, loss, things most people don't talk about." I turned the top page of the report over. "I also have an Etsy store. I sell printable journals, ebooks, things like that. I sell around 100 products a week." Alvin blinked, looking confused. "Wait, seriously?" I nodded. "Last quarter, my net income was just over $38,000. I let the number hang in the air for a moment. The silence was absolute. Ivy squinted at the papers on the table. Are you saying this is yours?" "Yes," I said simply. "I built it myself. Learned everything online." Alvin picked up the report, his eyes scanning the figures. "You made this much in 3 months?" "Sometimes more," I replied. He just stared at the page. Lacey looked like she was about to burst with questions, a brilliant smile spreading across her face, but she kept quiet. The younger kids had finally put their gadgets down and were watching, wide-eyed. Ivy crossed her arms over her chest. "And you never told us." "You never asked," I said. The room stayed quiet. No laughter now. No polite smiles. "I figured I'd get myself a proper gift this year," I said, standing up. I reached into my purse again and pulled out another envelope, this one smaller. I opened it slowly and held up a single, shiny silver key. "What's that?" Alvin asked, his voice strained. "A key to my new condo," I said. 2-bedroom, right in downtown Asheville. I closed on it last week. Alvin's eyes widened. Ivy's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. "It's near the farmer's market," I added, my voice warm with the thought of it. "Close to the co-op and the walking trails. It has wonderful natural light." I sat back down. No one said a word. Then I looked around the room again at the piles of stuff, the forced cheer, the utterly shocked faces, and I smiled, just a little, to myself. They thought I was idle. They thought I was invisible. Not anymore. If you've ever sat at a table where love came with conditions, go ahead and click subscribe, because people like us need to find each other. And if you're still thinking about it, at least do this. Scroll down and tell me in the comments, what kind of person forgets their own mother on Christmas morning? The quiet in the room was thick enough to taste. It was a silence born of shock, heavy with unspoken questions. Ivy stood with her arms folded, still as a statue. Alvin just looked from the financial report in his hands to me, as if trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the one sitting before him. I reached into my purse one last time and pulled out the folded packet of papers I'd printed before leaving Asheville. 4 pages, stapled at the corner. Just facts. No fluff. I placed it gently on the coffee table and pushed it toward them. What's that? Alvin asked again, his voice raspy. My business dashboard, I said. A quick summary of the last quarter. He picked it up slowly, hesitantly. Ivy leaned over his shoulder to read. That blog you once called my cute hobby, I said calmly, is in syndication now. 2 major women's wellness platforms asked to license my weekly articles. They pay me for the content and include links to my shop in every issue. Alvin blinked. Syndication? Like, national? Yes. One of them reaches over 200,000 readers a month. He kept flipping through the pages. I could see his eyes stop on the line item that showed the Etsy store performance. He squinted, as if he might have misread the numbers. My Etsy store, I said, preempting his question, was featured in Silver Years magazine's online holiday gift guide. That brought in a nice bump in sales. Ivy straightened up, her mask of polite indifference cracking. Silver Years? The lifestyle site. Yes, I said. Their holiday editor emailed me directly. I pointed to the bottom of the second page. That's the month it happened, right there. 9,340 orders in December alone. Mostly my printable grief journals. They cost me pennies to make. I write them, I format them, I upload them, and women all over the country buy them. Alvin finally cleared his throat. So this is all real. I nodded. All of it. Last quarter's income, after all my expenses, was $38,412. Ivy stepped back. She didn't say anything, but the color had drained from her face. Alvin finally looked up, his expression a mixture of awe and something that looked like shame. Mom, why didn't you say something? You never asked, I replied, my voice steady and even. Every time I called, it went to voicemail. Every message I sent got a one-word reply. And every holiday I sat at home, waiting to be remembered. No one moved. I took a breath and continued. I decided I wasn't going to wait anymore. So I built something. Quietly, on my own time. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it to feel alive again. And then it became something I love. My youngest grandson, Leo, finally looked up from his gadget, his eyes wide. Are you famous? He asked, genuinely curious. I smiled, a real smile this time. Not famous, honey. Just busy. Lacey was still staring at me, a small, proud grin on her face. She hadn't said a word since the conversation began, but her eyes told me everything. Maybe she hadn't known the details, but she had always suspected there was more to me than the others saw. Granny, she finally said, her voice clear and bright. This is amazing. I gave her a warm nod. Thank you, sweetheart. Alvin ran a hand over his beard, a nervous gesture. So this has been going on for how long? I started learning right after my 70th birthday. It turned into a real business within a year. He exhaled slowly through his nose. And you're making more than I do in some months. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Ivy, ever the opportunist, tried to recover. Well, she began, her voice regaining some of its corporate polish. Maybe we could do a feature on your blog and our company newsletter. We love to focus on female-led projects. I looked at her directly. I appreciate the thought, Ivy, but I'm already booked with collaborations through the next quarter. One is with a women's leadership retreat in Colorado. She blinked, momentarily speechless. Alvin chuckled nervously. Wow, this is really something, Mom. I picked up my teacup again and took a slow, deliberate sip. It started when you all stopped calling, I said quietly. That silence gave me time. And that time turned into this. No one laughed this time. No one tried to change the subject. They just sat there with it, the truth of it filling the room. Lacey finally leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. Do you think maybe I could intern with you next summer? I've been getting really interested in digital design and content writing. My heart swelled. I would love that. Ivy opened her mouth, perhaps to object, but then she closed it again, seeming to realize she had no ground to stand on. Alvin just rubbed the back of his neck and glanced at the report one more time. You've really built something, Mom, he said again, his voice softer now, tinged with a respect I hadn't heard in years. I nodded. Yes, I said. I have. They didn't say much after that. The rest of the morning passed in a slow, quiet haze. The energy in the house had irrevocably shifted. They had seen a truth about me, and once seen, it couldn't be unseen. We finished a quiet breakfast. The presents had all been opened, and the wrapping paper was gathered into trash bags. Leo had disappeared into his room with his new toys. Lacey stayed close, helping me clear the dishes, her eyes still bouncing between me and the envelope on the coffee table. I sat back down in my armchair with a fresh cup of tea and watched the steam rise. Alvin and Ivy sat across from me on the couch. I could feel something shifting in them, a recalibration, but I didn't know what it would be yet. Then Ivy spoke, her tone completely different now, lighter, almost conspiratorial. "You know, Della," she began, "what you've built is really impressive. Truly." I nodded. "Thank you." "I mean, building something like that at your age," she went on, "it's rare. It's inspiring." I raised an eyebrow slightly but stayed quiet. Alvin leaned forward, seizing the new opening. "Mom, maybe you could teach Ivy how you did it? She's been looking for something flexible she can do from home, especially now that the kids are older." I took another sip of tea, letting the moment settle. Ivy smiled, the polite, plastic kind. "I've been thinking about starting a blog, or maybe a digital product line. We could even build off what you've already created. Like a family brand, you know? Expand it together." Alvin nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, we could help you scale it, add new product lines, bring in professional marketing. There's real money in this, Mom. With our connections and your audience, it could go big." I looked from one to the other. Just yesterday, they had barely looked me in the eye. Today, they couldn't stop. I set my teacup down gently on its saucer and folded my hands in my lap. "No, thank you," I said, my voice clear and calm. Ivy blinked. "Sorry." I said no, I repeated gently. "I'm not interested in a partnership." Alvin frowned. "Why not? We're just trying to help." I leaned back in the chair. "Let me explain something." They stayed silent. For years, I called. I showed up. I brought gifts and meals. I made room for your schedules. I just wanted to be involved in your lives. And I was treated like an obligation. Like someone you had to manage, not someone you actually wanted around. Alvin looked down at his hands. I continued, the words coming not from anger, but from a place of deep clarity. "You iced me out." Quietly, but intentionally. The calls stopped. The invites stopped. Then came my 70th birthday, when nobody even remembered to send a card. That was the day I realized I had two choices. I could keep waiting for people who had clearly moved on without me, or I could build something for myself. Ivy shifted in her seat. "But, Della, that was years ago. Things change." "No," I interrupted, still calm. "I changed. And I did it without your help, without your support, without anyone even asking me how I was doing." They didn't argue. "And now that it's successful," I said, looking right at them, "you want in. Not because you're proud of me, but because you see potential for yourselves. That's not family. That's business. And I didn't build this to have it co-opted and handed off like a favor." Alvin rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not like that, Mom." "It is exactly like that," I replied. "If I handed you a tin of homemade cookies this morning, none of this would matter to you. But because I handed you a report with numbers and dollar signs, you suddenly see value in me." No one spoke. "I'm not angry," I added, and I meant it. Truly. I'm just clear. What I've built is mine. It's personal. It came from the quiet moments you didn't see. It grew out of the pain you never asked about. Ivy's practiced smile had disappeared completely. She looked stiff, unsure of where to even look. I stood up and reached for my coat, which was draped over the back of the chair. "I'm glad you know now. But it doesn't mean you get a piece of it." Alvin opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. I picked up the silver key I'd shown them earlier and slipped it back into my purse. "I didn't come here to rub anything in your faces. I came because you invited me. I brought gifts. I showed up. And when I wasn't given anything in return, I gave myself what I needed most." The room was still. Lacey stood near the kitchen doorway, watching it all, her eyes glistening just a little. "I hope you both find something that gives you what this has given me," I said softly. And with that, I walked out of the room. If someone has ever shown up only when they smelled success on you, hit that like button, because we see you. And if you wouldn't subscribe after hearing all this, then maybe ask yourself, would you be the kind to show up with empty hands and still expect a slice of the pie? Let's talk about it in the comments. I started packing my suitcase around 5 o'clock that evening. The house was quiet again. The kids were back in their rooms with their screens. Ivy had disappeared into the kitchen, and I could hear the faint clatter of pots and pans. Alvin was out back on the patio, pretending to sweep leaves. I folded my clothes neatly, zipped up my suitcase, and looked around the guest room one last time. The overhead light still flickered. The dresser was still dusty. It was exactly the same as when I'd arrived, but I was not. Lacey knocked lightly on the open door before stepping in. "Need some help?" she asked, her voice soft. I smiled. "I've got it, sweetheart, but thank you." She walked over and picked up the untouched basket of gifts I had brought. "Are you really going back to Asheville tonight?" "I am," I said. "I've got a little something to finish up before the day is over." She nodded slowly, then she leaned in and hugged me. Not the quick, polite kind, but a real hug. Warm and still. "You've always been the coolest one in this house, Granny," she whispered, "even when they acted like you weren't." My eyes softened. I held her a moment longer, then pulled back and reached into my coat pocket. I slipped a small, flat envelope into her hand. "What's this?" "A gift card," I said. "To your favorite bookstore. Use it on something that isn't required reading." She grinned, a genuine, bright flash of joy. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." She tucked it safely into the pocket of her hoodie. "Thanks, Granny." We carried my things downstairs together. Ivy stood by the front door, holding a dish towel, looking half surprised and half relieved. "You're really leaving today?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes. I have my own Christmas tradition to uphold back home. My readers expect my holiday post. I've never missed one." Alvin came in from the back patio just in time to hear that. He didn't say much, just gave me a stiff, awkward nod. I looked at both of them, standing there in their beautiful, silent house. "Thank you for having me." Ivy opened her mouth, maybe to say something else, an apology or another offer, but I didn't wait to find out. I hugged Lacey one more time, rolled my suitcase out to the car, and loaded it into the trunk myself. The air was crisp and cool on my cheeks. I started the engine, turned on the seat warmer, and pulled away from the curb without looking back. About 20 minutes into the drive, my phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Messages started rolling in. One from Alvin. One from Ivy. One from Lacey. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I put on a soft jazz playlist, let the dark ribbon of the road stretch out in front of me, and allowed my thoughts to drift. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in pale shades of orange and pink. I drove in silence for a long while, feeling no tension in my chest, no weight in my hands. Just a profound sense of peace. When I finally got home, I took a long, warm shower, changed into my favorite soft robe, and made a cup of chamomile tea. Then I sat down at my desk, turned on my little lamp, and opened my laptop. I logged into my blog's editor, scrolled to the draft I'd written a few days earlier, and added the final paragraph. The title was, "The Gift I Gave Myself." I hit publish. Within minutes, the comments started coming in. "Thank you for this, Stella. I needed to read this today. This made me cry, but in the best way. I feel like you were telling my story." They kept coming. Dozens, then hundreds of them. I closed the laptop gently, lit a small candle on my desk, and sat in the quiet, flickering glow of my living room. I thought of all the versions of myself that had waited by the phone, waited for an invitation, waited for someone else to see her. She wasn't waiting anymore. 3 months passed like pages turning in a book I actually wanted to read. The trees in Asheville began to bud again, and the sun stayed out a little longer each evening. My days found their gentle, productive rhythm. Early mornings writing, quiet afternoons working on new products, long walks through my new neighborhood, and hours spent answering messages from women all across the country who had become my community. The post I'd written on Christmas Eve had taken on a life of its own. It was shared thousands of times, quoted in newsletters I didn't even subscribe to. One morning, I received an email from a producer at a popular podcast I sometimes listen to called The Second Start. It highlighted stories of people over 50 starting new businesses and creative projects. She asked if I'd be willing to come on the show and talk about second win stories and how I got started. I said yes. The host called me from her studio in Boston. We talked for nearly an hour. She asked thoughtful questions about what it felt like to be overlooked, how I found purpose again, and what advice I'd give to other women who felt like they were starting late. I told her the truth. You don't need anyone's permission to begin, I said. You just need a little space and maybe a healthy dose of stubbornness. After the episode aired, my inbox flooded again. Not just with praise, but with connection. Real women telling me their stories, their regrets, their secret ideas. I replied to every single one. A few weeks later, Lacey came to visit during her spring break. She arrived with a duffel bag, her laptop, and a big, open smile. She said she wanted to learn everything: how I built the newsletter, how I organized product launches, how I managed customer support. She wasn't there to play pretend. She was serious and eager. We worked side by side at my sun-drenched kitchen table, drinking tea and building her first mini journal on Canva. I showed her how to schedule emails and how to track engagement. She caught on quickly. She always did. You really built all of this, she said one afternoon, her eyes wide as she scrolled through my business dashboard. Yes, I said, looking up from my planner. One post at a time. She looked so proud and maybe a little inspired. That gave me another idea. I started a mentoring circle. It was free, just a small group at first. 6 women from different towns, all over 65, all interested in learning how to use the internet to create something of their own. We met weekly on Zoom. We laughed. We struggled through the tech bugs together. We celebrated every tiny milestone. One of them launched a poetry blog. Another started an online baking club for her grandchildren. One woman just wanted to finally learn how to send a group email to her church friends, and she did it. It was never about going viral. It was about taking back a little space for ourselves, for the parts of us that had gone quiet for too long. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for someone else to make room for them at the table. I decided to build my own room, with a very large table, and leave the door wide open. One Saturday morning, I sat at my desk with my planner open, sunlight pouring in through the window, the very same window I used to stare out of, wondering if anyone would remember me. I took a deep, satisfying breath and wrote at the top of the page, Q2 goals, launch mentorship guide, finish spring journal series, plan subscriber retreat in Asheville. I smiled, a real, unforced smile that reached my eyes. They tried to count me out, I thought. Now they subscribed to my newsletter. This journey was never about proving anything to them. It was about becoming the person I knew I already was, long before they forgot how to see me. And now I want to ask you something. I built something out of silence. I turned loneliness into a legacy. If that moved you, even a little bit, hit subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember who they are. And if you watched this whole story all the way through and still won't subscribe, then tell me why. Honestly, the comments are open. I'll be reading.